to these long-term plan hearings on the 2nd of May. First of all, we have Anna Carter, Waikanae East landowners. We have 3 minutes for each presentation, plus 5 or 6 minutes for questions. So if you go over your 3 minutes, you get less questions.
All right.
That's the deal.
Sounds good. Kia ora koutou. As you know, my name's Anna Carter, and I'm been asked to speak on behalf of the 12 landowners who own land at Waikanae East, which is just to the south of Elizabeth Street over the railway line. They commissioned myself, Dr. Frank Boffa and Harriet Fraser, a transport engineer, to put together evidence to support rezoning of this 40-odd hectares of land on Council's IPI, the Intensification Plan Change, Plan Change 2. That was on the back of Council's Te Tupe Pai Growing Well, the growth strategy, which had recommended this area as a priority area for rezoning. Unfortunately, it didn't make the cut, and the reasons are, set out. You'll all be familiar with it because you were probably sitting on making the decisions. But it didn't make the cut primarily because it was considered out of scope. Like most greenfield land, it was deemed to be needing to be subject to a Schedule 1 process, a plan change process, and the reason for that was because the land was large enough that it should have been given the opportunity to landowners or the community to make submissions. So the hearing panel and this made a recommendation which Council adopted in its decision, which was to task its officers to go away and look at undertaking a Schedule 1, whether it was appropriate to undertake a Schedule 1 process and report back to yourselves. On that, we have been meeting with Council staff and looking at how we might progress a Schedule 1 process for this area of land because, as you can see, the landowners are still very much engaged. I should have introduced, I've got 2 of the landowners here with me today, Brett Percival and Wendy Ward, and others are live streaming in. Watching, but they are very engaged, and they have also invested a lot of money pulling together the evidence to support that initial submission on the IPI, and they don't want that data and that information and that evidence lost, and so they're very keen to still see this land be subject to a Schedule 1 process. Where we're sitting at the moment, though, is that the risks are still really high for the landowners, and what we're looking for is an alliance or a partnership with Council to proceed down the track of that Schedule 1 process. And so we're looking at establishing a memorandum of understanding with Council to establish how we might go forward with this plan change and how that might, the preparation of that evidence might be cost shared. And we're looking for some decisions from Council through this long-term plan process to achieve that. The other part to this is that through that evidence process, Harriet Fraser identified that in the short to medium term, the current transportation network servicing Waikanae East is sufficient to meet the growth needs for the medium density development that could come out of Waikanae East right now, plus any development in the medium term for the land that we're talking about. But in the long term, there's going to be constraints on that transportation network, and that we need to start looking at feasibility studies to look at how we might get a second crossing from Waikanae East over, so an east-west connection. So we're also looking for the LTP to look at funding that process. We don't know what that would cost, but we think it sits, that piece of work sits really well with KCDC as the lead agency for that. It's not something that we would be looking to do. It would be something that we'd be asking the Council to pick up and do. And the third piece, the third request that we're putting to you today is in relation to looking at how your development contribution policy and financial contributions, mainly your DCs, can ensure that it provides for capacity and servicing in the network. And as developers and landowners, we're aware that there's going to be a need to contribute to those costs, and that just so that the policy itself recognises that it may be that in order to fund infrastructure in this area, that there might need to be something like a targeted rate or a special development contribution set aside for servicing any new development in what we call Waikanae East. So those are really the 3 submission points that I'm making. And all the background on the actual rezoning for this land is contained in my submission, and I'm also more than happy to come and talk to any of you about it at any time if you want to get any more information. But as the independent hearing panel had said, they did commend it. In fact, what they said, and I have quoted it on page 7 of my submission, I think. No, not page 7. On page 9, they say, it is the type of intensification next to a strategic transport hub that is likely to secure the best urban outcomes for the community. So I think it is recognised that it is a really great location for urban development. It's within walking distance of a rapid transport network and a community area and a school. So I will leave it there, and if there's any questions, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Coe.
Oh, gosh, was that quick off the mark. So just to clarify, are you suggesting that we assume for the purposes of the long-term plan that this land will be rezoned? Is that the request? That we take that into account, that as if the land is to be rezoned within the next few years or so?
The request is for the process. As it's about the process to rezone the land. So no, we can't. We don't want to predetermine any outcome of that process. It's a Schedule 1 process. Will be completely independent. So the request is around developing this memorandum of understanding and establishing a process for taking it through.
I'm just wondering whether that's actually an LTP issue. Perhaps I could get clarification on that from staff or something. Is this, the process
I
around
think we
rezoning,
take the submission, and when we analyse the submissions, we can find a home for it there. At the moment, we've got a request, we've got a submission. We take that and we ask for points of clarity where it lands in terms of the council machine is a separate issue to today.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Anna. Previously, Anna the planner from KCDC.
A long time ago.
Yeah, a long time ago. So a couple of things. So wanting a Schedule 1 process under the RMA, you see, just calling back on your planning days, do you see any issues with KCDC effectively partnering in that process, having an MOU partnering in that process, and then subsequently being a consenting authority?
Well, it's a good question, and it's been done in other territorial authorities, and Porirua City Council was one of those for the Northern Growth Area. And they did, there was some issues around, there were 2 memorandums of understanding entered into for the Porirua Northern Growth Area. The second one really clarified the roles clearly so that it was around process and cost sharing and not around outcomes. And so it wasn't predetermining the outcome. The MOU didn't predetermine the outcome, and that's where it came to. In fact, that memorandum of understanding for the Porirua Northern Growth Area was developed by council's own lawyers, Simpson Gresham.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
So we've actually shared that document with council staff.
Okay. One very, very exciting part about this is that everyone will be aware, the community for a long time have been looking for an alternate across the line. The Goodmans area was a consideration at one point, but it was a bit too expensive at the time. So has that been developed at all, or is that just very embryonic?
Very embryonic.
Yeah.
Goodmans still have had KiwiRail come and talk to them in the last year, I believe, about that. But as far as we understand, the costs are probably too high. There's some significant costs to get under the railway line and get it at grade onto Te Moana Road. But that's not to say it should be ruled out. What we're saying is that we think there needs to be a feasibility study that looks at all the options. Frank Boffer actually identified that option plus another option further north, coming out across and meeting up with Waikanae North opposite Ryman's as another alternative, which might be more feasible. But it is something that desperately needs to be investigated.
I mean, somewhere on somebody's desk there is actually a plan for an underpass.
Yeah.
Because
I
originally
think we'll
there was
move
going to be
on
one.
from this.
Okay, so
topic.
just the last part for me, very much welcome special developer contributions.
Yeah.
Always helpful with those.
Yeah.
Is there any estimate at this stage what the number of dwellings would be?
Oh, I'm glad you asked me that and not what the costs would be, because I don't have an estimate on that at the moment, sorry. That's kind of on the table. But number of dwellings was estimated in the growth strategy at 480, and that didn't take into account the current medium density residential standards, which would allow, up to 3 dwellings on a lot.
Right.
So at least, we're saying at least 480 plus the medium provision for medium density, and possibly higher density closer to around the Goodman's Yard if that was to be a higher density precinct. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Yeah, just to follow up from that, considering that number of dwellings, have you looked into fast tracking this development?
We wouldn't consider fast tracking it until the land was rezoned, on the basis that all this underlying objectives and policies still apply.
Right.
So we would think that that would be too much of a high risk, and that's the advice that we've been given.
Yeah, that makes sense. Councillor Varnoff?
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, thank you, Anna, for coming along to speak today on behalf of these landowners. So just to follow up on what Councillor Coe was saying in terms of the relevance of to the long-term plan, is it correct that on page 10 you're actually asking for resourcing to facilitate giving effect to the recommendations of the hearing panel, and I think that was within 6 months of that decision?
Yeah, I think that this a decision to say establish an MOU would probably give effect to that resolution. Yeah.
Okay. So the other question I had, are you aware of, and I suppose it's been a very long conversation about having another access way to the eastern side of the railway line in Waikanae through Hadfield Road, that general area?
Yes, that was another area that Frank Boffer had identified in our structure plan. So if you have a look at the structure plan, and the Mayor has a big A1 copy of it somewhere that we left with you, you'll see that there are those 3 options: one under Timuana Road by Goodman's Yard, one opposite Ryman's, and one into Hadfield. Maybe it's a mix, who knows?
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah.
Great, thanks Anna. Thanks for coming in and thanks for your submission.
Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you, thank you.
Thanks.
Very exciting. Claire Roper.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Claire Roper and I live up in Otaki, and I'm one of the volunteers who helps run the Otaki market, and I have a lovely presentation up there on the screen for you all to see. That is the Otaki market by numbers, and this market has been running since 1995 and was set up by the Otaki Women's Community Club as a fundraising branch so they could give back to the local community. About 18 months ago, this market was in danger of closing, so we went on a little bit of a exercise to bring it back to its glory days, and I believe that we have possibly got there with that. So it is now very much a thriving, bustling little community market, and we feel that it's become a little bit more than just a market as well. It is a little bit of an incubator for small businesses as well, and we have a few success stories of small businesses that have come in. One stall holder started off as helping us on the sausage sizzle, and now has her own very fully fledged stall, which is very exciting. We have a hangi that started off by selling from the back of their ute, and they are now there as a thriving business selling more than just hangi, lots of yummy food there as well. We have a local baker, a local woman who was running a stall, and we as a club helped her financially to pay for her food certification, which was a loan, and she's paid us back, and now she has a lovely, delicious home baking stall there. And then we also have the kids market, which is run during the school holidays, and we have 2 judges here who have judged the best kids stall, which it's not a job that I would want to do, but Janet, they did a great job. So our average footfall is about 700 people on an average Sunday, and during our themed markets, which we have about 4 or 5 a year, we can get up to about 2,000 for a footfall, which is really good for a very small little local market. So we are very proud of what we have done, and we've even managed to scam ourselves onto TV 3 times, so that's been pretty exciting. One of the things I wanted to talk to you today is, obviously we're very passionate about the market and how that can help Otaki, is the land that we use to host the market on is across the road from New World in Otaki, and there's the car park area, and then there's the small grassed area as well. And we would be very interested if the council would be able to consider purchasing that land. At the moment, especially during the winter, let's see if I can press this correctly, during the winter, it can be full of potholes, and it can be a slightly unpleasant space for, obviously not the little boy there who's having a great time, but some of our stall holders and our visitors, and we would really like to be able to lift that area and make it a really great space for people who are visiting, people who are stall holders that could come along and check. So we'd really be grateful if you could consider with the LTP in purchasing that land. I know it could be a little bit of no man's land at the moment with Waka Kotahi and the council, so I'm fully aware of the difficulties that there may be there. And then I have a list of this wonderful long list of things that once that land is acquired that we could do to make that area even more interesting for the community and especially for Otaki. Was that my 3 minutes? Did I do all right?
I'm guessing
I
that
do,
was
there are,
exactly 3 minutes.
So this, and up here is just a quick example of some of the stall holders who have started off on the barbecue down the bottom there and worked way up to a fully fledged market. And then at the top there with the balloon is when they started off at the hangi, and now they've moved through to their own little caravan. They were invited to go to Waitangi Day Festival down in Porirua, the Kapiti Food Festival, the Medieval Fair. So they've really created a bit of a name for themselves, these stall holders. And I can tell you they are super delicious food, so it's definitely worth a look. And then there is a lovely little timeline there if anyone is interested in reading that.
Fantastic. That's a great presentation. Thanks, Claire.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you so much to you and the team for the work that you do. It's just incredible what you've managed to achieve and how you help these fledgling businesses, including children, grow their entrepreneurial skills. So I'll go to Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks for that, Claire. The kids' markets is fabulous, eh?
Yes.
A new round of entrepreneurs coming through. Do you know who currently... my understanding is that that's currently Road Reserve. I don't know. Do you know who owns it?
I kind of agree with you a little bit. I've heard that Waka Kotahi potentially own it, and maybe it's managed by council, but then there is another that is reserved land, so we're not 100% sure.
Okay, and with revocation...
I think that we'll look into all of that in the light of the submission. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic.
Yeah,
and
good.
So the plan for, on the assumption that council owned the land and could tidy it up, etc., is there enough room to expand the market?
I believe there would be. We would need to look at the layout that we currently have and move some of those stalls around a little bit, and we would definitely be able to expand with some of our themed markets, which we have about 4 a year. There could be the possibility of working with council to perhaps getting that little access road closed, and then that can go all the way through and bring more stalls in that way as well. But with a little bit of jiggery, yes, we can fit more in, definitely.
Oh, cool, congratulations, brilliant market.
Councillor Warwick.
I just want to say thank you, Claire, because I know that this women's group has run it for a long time, and about 10 years ago they'd put something like $70,000 back into our community, which now you continue to do. And I was hoping you would just expand a little bit, if you can, on the things that you hope to be able to do there, the extra things other than the market, if we upgrade that little bit of land for Otaki.
Yeah,
Very
so
briefly, because we've
there-
got to the
there
end of
are-
our time.
how long do I have? I can talk real fast.
Yeah, talk fast.
We are looking at perhaps working with a local business there who's interested in doing a sort of a 2-day festival around a tenting and camping expo. So that would be something that could be super exciting for Otaki and bringing a lot more people in. We would definitely like to be able to see that piece of land, especially the grass area, used more actively on Saturdays rather than just for us on a Sunday. It is a lovely piece of land there that could be used, definitely. And I have lots of really cool things that we would like to do to that area. Have an entranceway on the car park at either end to make it safe for stall holders to drive in and out, those sorts of things. Definitely a nice big Christmas festival that we could have there. Work with some of the other markets that are along the Kapiti coast as well, and maybe have a really fun cycling expo that could come up and down using the new cycleway that's there. So there's lots of really cool things that we could do.
What a lovely way to finish. Thank you for that question, Shelley. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
And we'll look forward to talking to you more.
Excellent, thank
Yeah,
you so much.
Thank you. And the Youth Council have just filed in, bang on time. So come up, we've got a couple of spare chairs around here, so you can all, there's a couple at the end of the table not being used. Just all kind of gather around that end table, if that's okay. Yep. Anyone that nobody's sitting in is free for you to use.
Wow, thanks.
Well, thanks for your submission and thanks for coming in today. It's really lovely to see you and really lovely to see the submission. It was an excellent written submission covering a lot of different topics. So congratulations, and we look forward to hearing you expanding on it today. So your time is 3 minutes and it starts now. Start when you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Oliver Sterling. I'm from the Kapiti Coast Youth Council. Sitting next to me is Zoe, another representative, and next to her is Liam, another representative from the council. We have a long-term plan submission to offer this afternoon. It's split into 2 sections. The first is an advocacy section, and the second section is a tangible action section. I will be talking about the health services section and the smoke and vape free section. Then Zoe will move on from there, and we'll finish with Liam, and hopefully that'll all be within the time limit. Looking around, I can see a few familiar faces. I've met a couple of you before, so I'm really excited to speak to you about the health services section first.
Yeah, don't rush. We can be a little bit flexible, so don't hurry. That's the main thing.
That's what it is. So as a community, and I have personal experience with this, so do siblings and relatives, and I'm sure the wider collective Kapiti community does as well. There are numerous shortfalls in terms of the services offered, especially to youth and facilities that cater for youth, but also to the elderly. There are transport issues, there are access to care issues, critical care issues, issues that can end up taking someone's life, like the 60-minute ambulance trip it takes to get to the only 24/7 health centre that's open in the entire Wellington region that we have access to. Some of you might mention Team Medical or Kenepuru hospitals. I hate and regret to inform you that Kenepuru is critically short of doctors, and Team Medical's only open from about 8:30 in the morning, 8 to 8:30 until 9:45 at night. So if you have a medical emergency after that, you could be waiting an hour for an ambulance if you're determined not to be critically life-threatening. And that's just one of those issues. Another is the fact that people who aren't or don't have critical health issues that require paramedic attendance have to somehow find a way to get to Wellington Hospital or another closely related health service provider. And that is a very difficult challenge for people who are very young and don't have access to transport, and for people who are very old and don't have access to transport. This all needs to change, and related to that, there are no, I guess you could call it, secondary care facilities available within our region other than the new MRI facility that's just gone in at Pacific Radiology, so that is a step forward. And the Kapiti Health Advisory Group has sent out information about that, so that's very helpful. But we're still short a polyclinic of some kind that could provide an intermediary between primary and secondary care. So I really and strongly urge this council to consider following that through. Moving on to smoking and vape 3 policies. I'm aware that this, and so is the Kapiti Youth Council, is aware that this council does not provide health services to this community, but you do have the option to advocate for them. And as I'm aware that Janet, you wrote and co-authored with other council members a letter to the Health Minister about smoke-free legislation based on the advice of the Kapiti Health Advisory Group. And I'm speaking for not only myself but the rest of the Youth Council when we strongly stand firmly in support of that. So we'd love to see council follow through and do everything they can to limit smoking and vaping in schools, especially, and make it less accessible to people on the street. Make sure that there's no signage, less shops, more restrictions about vaping and smoking in public. These are all measures that could be undertaken. So you do have a chance here to advocate for youth. You do have a chance here to make sure that our voices are heard about health. More information is available in my submission, and I'd like to hand over now to Zoe.
Kia ora, I'm Zoe. I just wanted to expand a little bit on the mental health sector. So, although we know it is not in your direct power to change this, we as the Youth Council urge you to advocate for it. Now, personally, I have had some first-hand experiences of friends who needed these services due to their mental health, and we have waited over an hour to receive these services to come towards us. And that was very devastating for me as someone who needed to support someone else that was going through this. And yeah, it was just very upsetting. So we hope that you advocate for more, better services for that. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the environmental sector. So we as a youth council believe it is important that the Kapiti Coast District Council prioritises and advocates for the protection and restoration of the Wharemoku stream, the sand dunes in Otaki, and the Mangapōuri stream in Otaki as well, and to continue for the funding of Ngā Manu, as it is a very important place to us, and it is a very important place to the Kapiti Coast, as it is one of the only places that takes care of injured and diseased birds and wildlife. And I'd like to pass over to Liam.
Hey guys, I'm Liam. I'll be touching over transport, and like the other two have said, I know you guys don't have the direct power to affect this, but you can advocate for it. So what do we all know about children? They can't drive. So that means the youth of Kapiti is very divided by the lack of public transport, especially from upper Waikanae over to Otaki and down past Raumati down to Paikok. I know that personally from experience, if you're trapped in Te Horo or you're trapped in Otaki and you need to get back to Paraparaumu, your options are quite limited if you don't have a car available to you, especially after the hours of 7 p.m. Recently, we talked to some of the senior leadership team from Otaki College, and we were told the story of a boy who goes to his youth church in Otaki, and he takes the bus there at 7 p.m, but then he can't take the bus back because there are no buses, so he has to rely on his parents, or he has to rely on someone to come pick him up, or he has to risk walking in the dark. There's also a issue with reliability with the public buses, especially coming from the train station. All the primary and secondary school students who come in from Paikokariki to Kapiti College and from Otaki to Paraparaumu College, once they get there, there's a lot of them that need the same buses to get there, and there just isn't enough capacity or amount of buses to take them there reliably. And this results in students being late to school, which results in students getting in trouble for being late to school, and parents getting angry that their kids are getting late to school. And it's just not ideal for the kids. But it's also an issue due to Kapiti's high percentage of retirees, who some of them can't also drive, and so it doesn't just affect the youth. I'm also going to touch over some of the tangible actions that we would like to present. The first one is lighting. As we know, it's coming into winter, and so it gets dark relatively quickly. This means that it's quite unsafe for youth to be outside after sunset. And there's also, since due to the lack of lighting in areas such as, Mazingar Park and coastlands to Raumati and Wharemoku Stream and like the Waikanai and Otaihanga Reserve, those are like key, what are they called? Connections from Waikanai and Pram and Parapanumu to Raumati, and so all kids and anyone in general who are walking between those areas after hours, it's not even really after hours, it's 5:30, then it gets dark and it's not particularly safe for them. And also water fountains. Kids like to play outside, and when kids play outside they get thirsty, everyone gets thirsty, and not everyone has access to bottled water all the time. So more water fountains in high traffic areas like coastlands and the new transport hub will benefit everybody. Also public toilets. I feel like this is quite self-explanatory. Everyone needs to go to the bathroom sometimes. Not everyone can plan their toilet breaks at home too reliably. And then the last one is the indoor sports centre. It is clear to the Youth Council and to all of us with public knowledge that there is a significant lack of activities and things to do for young people in Kapiti, especially in the colder winter wet months. This results in the youth of the district having to find other ways and going to other places to entertain themselves. So we believe that the Kapiti Coast District Council should prioritise the newly proposed indoor sports centre, and it would benefit everybody and the wider community. All right. I think that's all.
Yeah, that's fairly comprehensive. Thank you. Excellent submission. I just, I'm guessing, because you're asking us to advocate to Greater Wellington around public transport, that you haven't made a submission to them about that directly. Yeah, so when we present our submission, because we have talked about public transport in our submission, we will endeavour to pass on your comments to them when we have the opportunity to speak to them through that process. So, yeah, that kind of covers off that one. I do like the way you've touched on different kind of elements, and a wide range of issues, and really thought deeply about them. So thank you very much. Got a question from Michael Moore.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. If you ever want to be despondent about adults arguing on Facebook, you just have to listen to the Kapiti Youth Council and be invigorated by the articulation and your inspiration and looking forward. So I want to acknowledge that first. It's really really well presented. I won't mention much more about the transport, which is what I was going to raise, because it's an area that Te Horo, where I live, and Councillor Kodu have been advocating direct to regional council. So we've been getting some leverage there, but it is an issue, and you have touched exactly on the points that we've been advocating for, of more access. So I thank you for that.
Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, thank you, through Madam Chair. Hi guys, great to see you. Very rich. I've only said this once before, and we had a very good submission from the Older Persons Council, which is very similar with regards to that. There's a lot of stuff in there which we'll pick up, I dare say, out of this process as well. But a couple of things I did want to comment on. Are you aware of the Kapiti Health Advisory Group, or CAG as such? A lot of the points you made are things that they are actually addressing. I'm just wondering, would you like a bit of more connection with that group or something, or perhaps you can have them to come and discuss what they're doing with you as such?
Can I respond to your question? Yes, I actually belong to a subgroup within that group, the Kapiti Tamariki and Rangatahi.
Fantastic. No, I just want to know whether you were linked to it.
Yeah, so I've got a small link there, but yes, I think there should be more of a connection.
Okay, well, we can work on that. That's great.
Groups.
And the vaping, as such, we've made our stance pretty clear on that. But have you approached your local MP around that, Tim Cosley?
I haven't approached. As a council, we have not approached him yet, no.
That might be a really good step, because that's a central government step really now. We've done our much as we can, but this is something that needs to be changed legislatively, and I'm sure a strong interaction with him, if you like, in that space will certainly be something that will be noticed. And that's also certainly be some advice I would have. Other than that, we also have the age-friendly approach reference group as well. Although that tends to refer older people, what tends to, as you've alluded to, what's good for our older community tends to be very good for a lot of other people there as well. So it'd be really good to see some linkage there as well. But we can take that offline, and perhaps I'll get along to your next meeting or something like that and discuss some of this stuff. Would be fantastic.
Sounds wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, have you invited your two MPs to your meetings? They're both people who'd be quite keen to go, I think. Yeah. Councillor Pravanov.
I thank you through the chair. Thank you very much for your presentations today and the document that you've put together. It's fantastic. Well done, and no doubt it's taken a lot of time. I just wanted to raise a couple of matters. So one was the transport, and so we have submitted to GW about some of the real pinch points in our district with public transport, and I think you've raised those as well. The one that you talk about lighting and on walkways, have you, I think the Youth Council has a representative on the CWB, and have they had a chance to actually take this issue forward to that advisory group, which would be a really good opportunity to do, I think?
Yeah, Sam sits on our, he's our CWB rep, so he does feed into that group, but we felt it was important to include in the long-term plan also.
Yes. Yeah. So, but I think sometimes you talk about these things in multiple situations, it does land. Yeah. And I also wanted to just raise some issues in the environment, and I have to say I wasn't here this morning because I was in Wellington talking with GW about the state of the quality of our water in our district, and so there is stuff happening in that space as well. Thank you.
I think Councillor Wilson next, or Councillor Coфord? Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, it's an excellent submission. The Barbara Edmonds, the Mana MP, is currently organising a petition around the after hours health thing, so I hope you guys get an opportunity. I'm sure she would welcome an opportunity to talk directly to you about that. Just the one question. As a youth council, do you feel, and don't feel obliged to ameliorate people, but do you feel you get enough support from council to do what it is that you're wanting to do as a youth council?
Great question.
I mean, just feel free to say whatever you want to say.
I feel like we do get quite a bit of support, especially from Sophie Hanford. I know she's on this council, and she does advocate with us quite a bit about what's going on in your council and how that relates to us and links to us as a youth council. We can always be more connected. There's always more things that we could be involved with. So if there was anything that you guys could, relay to us, anything that you need our opinions on, anything that could affect the youth in the local area, obviously it wouldn't hurt to come to us about that. But I feel like currently the connection between Youth Council and the Kapiti Coast District Council is pretty good.
Good to hear. That was the right answer, by the way.
There are no wrong answers.
Probably won't like my one as much then.
No, be honest. Be honest.
No, so I've been, of the three of us here today, I think I'd be the longest serving member of the Youth Council here today. And I'd say that support from the council has fluctuated. I've been a member since early 2021, so coming on 4 years. And while the interactions are always, or almost always positive, there certainly have been times where we've been very distant. So I think now that, I agree with Liam, that now things are in a much better space, but it's a matter of keeping things that way. So it's a matter of us putting in just as much effort as you guys. So submitting things when it's our turn to, having meetings with you, some of you one-on-one, in small groups, meetings with MPs, like you've mentioned, and meetings together as a larger group when they can be arranged, and more events like the councillor breakfast and possibly more attendance from some of you would be, sincerely appreciated, although I do appreciate that everybody has very busy schedules, so I'm acknowledging that as well. But yes, thank you.
And just from another perspective, from someone who just joined the Youth Council this year, it's been really nice to get to know you all, and I think meetings like this have been really helpful, just mentioning different things like MPs and different things that we haven't actually considered, and maybe like potential people we could approach instead of them approaching us. So yeah, it has been very helpful so far, and I think the council's breakfast was a good way as well, so maybe we could do something like that as well.
Cool. Brilliant.
Great.
Oh, thanks,
Councillor Cockford.
Madam Chair. Yeah, thanks team for coming. You're absolute inspiration. I can see some future councillors and MPs here, team leaders. Yeah, Sam has been wonderful with his input into the CWB. We just had Bruce Henderson, the chair, give us a presentation this morning. And that leads me on to a question. We have the cycleway walkways, which, okay, some of them have lighting on them. Do you guys use them very much, for connections to where you're going? And could we improve those? We've got the big one, the expressway, and then we're looking at the infrastructure going east, west, mountains to the sea and all of that. And do you use those, and can you see any improvements there? But Sam has been incredible with his input.
As someone who has to ride his bike to a lot of places, I do use those quite a bit. I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure what you want me to comment on.
Can they be improved? Are they, okay for you? Do you feel safe where you cycle generally? You probably cycle in the suburbs.
Yeah.
Going to your functions and that, and how.
So the expressway cycleway is quite good. There's good lighting across the whole thing, and then it's a relatively new cycleway, so the road quality itself is quite good. In terms of like suburban cycleways, there could be better improvements to the actual cycle lanes on the road. Sometimes they do get a little bit thin, but other than that, I feel like it's all right. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have, unfortunately, I can relate to Liam a lot in that sense. I use the Kapiti Expressway for exercise and, for road cycling on occasion. And while I can appreciate that section of the expressway that is well lit, well resourced, looked after, clean and tidy, there are some other cycleways that this council is somewhat responsible for, although not all of you directly and personally, but certainly has influence over that, can definitely be improved. There's been many a time where I've been run off the road on a road bike wearing fluorescent gear and just had to, kind of tuck and roll through it. But I'm a bigger guy, so I tend to come out of those things with just a couple of scratches and bumps, but a younger child, perhaps not wearing fluorescent gear, or an older person who is more vulnerable to injury and serious incident, would be unlikely to sustain that experience without significant consequences. So I feel like there does need to be some improvements. Yeah, thank you.
I'm not seeing any more lights, so thanks for coming along today and sharing your thoughts with us. We really, really appreciate it. And a few challenges laid down for us, and anything that will feed into the Vision Kapiti will get transferred over to that work as well. Those more long-term aspirational goals. So really valuable to have your input. So thank you so much. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for all your comments as well. We all say thank you, and on behalf of the Youth Council says thank you as well. So thanks a lot.
Appreciate your time.
So we are running a bit over time, but I'm not particularly worried about it because we have a bit of a buffer built into the program here. So we'll just carry on, but if we could start tightening up the time a little bit, that would be good. So Michael Papesh.
Before I start, can I just clarify, people are talking about 3 minutes?
Yes, yeah, 3 minutes plus 5 or 6 minutes for questions.
Okay,
So
'cause
that leaves a bit of a buffer.
The email I got suggested I would have 10 in time for questions.
Yeah, somebody else came in and thought they had 20, so I don't know what's going on there, but.
So
if
I
it-
prepared something for 10, because that's what I was invited to do from the
so-
council.
So you can speak for 10 minutes, but we won't have time for questions.
Okay?
Yeah, is that
All right.
okay?
I will see how quickly I can go.
Yeah.
All right. Look, thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. I'm a retired senior public servant. I came to Kapiti Coast 18 months ago. On the first page of my submission, I outlined my experience in central government budgeting and finance. While the context between the central and local governments differs a bit, actually I think the underlying kind of financial principles are essentially the same, and I'm going to talk about those. The long-term plan is an important document as it sets a framework for the next 10 years. In the publicity around the plan, I've been intrigued in the op-ed pieces, even in the consultation document itself, doesn't point much to the most important decision that's built into your plan, which is, are you happy for your rates to double in both nominal and real terms over the next 10 years? Instead, we're distracted onto free waters, debt reduction, community housing, and a climate change rate. There's 3 big things I want to highlight out of my submission to you. Issue 1, keep to your financial management framework. It's not explicit in the plan, but as explained at one of the drop-ins, the council has an underlying financial model where annual operating expenses are paid for a mixture of fees and charges and rates, and there's some allowance for depreciation. Capital expenditure is financed by borrowing, which is repaid over the life of the asset. This means that the cost of the capital works are paid by the users of those assets over the time period those assets are used. Development contributions are used to pay for the upfront cost of some growth assets associated with new developments. I commend you because this is a very sound financial management framework for the activities of the council and should be used as a way of assessing the financing proposals in your plan. Specifically, the proposal to fully fund depreciation is supported provided that safeguards are put in place to prevent the funds being diverted off to other purposes, which often happens in central government. That's where you get infrastructure deficits. The proposal to fund free waters, the one-off funding gap for free waters through rates is supported if the expenditure itself is justified, if it's operating and not capital, and if the one-off rate is rescinded in the following year. If it's capital, it should be debt financed. There is no case to accelerate debt repayment as proposed in the plan. The right level of debt is determined by 2 things. The first thing that determines the right level of debt is the justifiable capital investment program, which is then paid off by all users through the repayment of debt over the lifetime of the asset. The second driver for the right level of debt is the affordability of the resulting rates burden. There is nothing in the consultation document that shows either is problematic at the moment. The consultation document instead claims that early debt repayment will lead to intergenerational equity, but it doesn't. Current ratepayers will pay off more debt than their use of the assets justifies. Future ratepayers will pay less. That's not intergenerational equity, that's a subsidy to future ratepayers paid for by current ratepayers. If you want to cross-subsidise future ratepayers, by all means make the case, but don't pretend it's anything other than a cross-subsidy. The proposal for early debt repayment is not supported. It's not even justified or consistent with the financial management framework you say that you're working to. Issue 2. The proposed level of rates increases is not justified and will impose significant hardship on your ratepayers. Under your preferred option, in 10 years' time, rates will be 115% higher in nominal terms than they are now. Under your alternative scenario, rates will be 71% higher in 10 years' time than they are now. If we consider forecast CPI inflation for the next 10 years, that's a 92% real increase in rates under your preferred option and a 48% increase in rates under your alternative rate scenario. I'm a ratepayer whose income is CPI linked. So at 27% of your current residents, a proportion that's only going to grow. This level of rates rise will hurt ratepayers like me. The tone of the consultation document is oblivious to the hardships that these rates increases will cause your constituents. The tone is, that's just the way things are. More importantly, there's no justification for the level of real increase in expenditure, even under the alternative rate scenario. You are always going to be bombarded with bright ideas for spending ratepayers' money. In the time that I've been sitting here in the last half hour, I've heard plenty of them to you in the last half hour. With the level of rates rises that you're talking about, it looks to me that you have no clear framework or process for making choices and saying no to ideas for spending. But there are choices you can make. If you're not willing to make them, they will have to be made somewhere else. What the council does in the long-term plan is push these choices onto ratepayers. The choices that ratepayers like me will have to consider or make is, will I need to move locality or house to lower my rates bill? What other expenses am I going to have to cut to be able to afford my rates? If I'm retired, will I have to go out and find a job? One of the things that came up in the drop-in discussion was a view by your officials that local authorities' rates have risen faster than CPI, which in itself makes rates increases above CPI simply inevitable. These claims will be supported by the February 2024 Infometrics report on cost increases in local rates in the local government sector. But that report looks at only the last 4 years. If you look over a longer time period, I've calculated from 2011 to 2023, increases in the capital price index have been modest and have been higher than CPI by just over a percentage point a year. So your officials have no basis to assume that recent high increases in costs will always be the case for each of the next 10 years. Moreover, what your officials are saying to you is that the council is and always will be a cost-plus organisation, unable to manage its cost structures. I don't think that's a position that you should be accepting. I have copies of a graph on capital price index and CPI over the last 12 years. I'll leave it with your officials for you to be able to have a look at. The third issue I want to highlight is consulting the community on a rates anchor. You might think that the consultation on the long-term plan would seek community views on what upper limits should guide rate levels, and thus set a budget constraint for what will and will not be funded over the next 10 years. But no. The question is summarily dismissed in 3 short paragraphs on page 18. The text quickly dismisses the Shand guideline of rates of 5% of median income as out of date, without any evidence to justify why. The council instead suggests a 7% rates anchor without any justification, which you then immediately propose to breach. So much for that rates anchor then. There may be a case for moving away from the Shand benchmark, but the fact that it was developed 17 years ago is not a reason for tossing it away. If you want to move from the Shand guideline, you should make the case explicitly to do so. The plan would have been a great place to do this, but you didn't. Instead, the plan assumes that large rates increases are just the natural order of things and implicitly says to the community, you just need to suck it up. I submit to you that you need to do a separate consultation on what I call in my submission a rates anchor, or the upper limits of what rates should be as a proportion of median income. You could do this most easily by discussing what you get and what you don't get with rates set at, say, 5% or 6% or 7% of median income, and enable the community to tell you where they think the sweet spot is. This will involve an honest conversation with the community about what will be done and where the line is drawn at various budget levels. There is nothing in this consultation that enables this discussion to occur, which is why it's going to have to be done in the future. In the meantime, I submit that you should keep rates at the 5% benchmark so that real spending growth is kept in check in the meantime. Finally, just a comment on process. There's not much time between these hearings and you making final decisions at the end of June. There's not a lot of time for you to do anything other than to endorse what you've already consulted on. The time frame and process has the smell and feel of a preordained outcome. I look forward to your assurance that this isn't the case and I haven't wasted my time and yours by being here. Thank you.
Yeah, so we've hit 10 minutes. So Martin's pressed his button first, so I'll let Martin ask a question and then we're going to wrap up this one. Sorry.
I just want a very quick comment, which was thank you very much for that. You haven't wasted your time. I found your submission very informative. Thank you very much.
Seeing as that was so quick, I'll go to Nigel.
Right,
See how quick you can be, Nigel, and we might just get to Liz.
So did I, quite frankly, and I could happily have 20 minutes worth of question time. I'm not quite sure how we could facilitate this, but it was a really impressive submission, and I really think we should have an opportunity to have a little chat. So I'm not quite sure how we do that, if we've got to pull the plug now. But I will ask you one quick, just an observation. The Shand benchmark that you refer to, we have David Shand, who actually sits at the table. He's not here at the moment. He did a runner. Must have known you were coming. I think he's given up on the Shand benchmark himself, or he's softened the position on it. So that's just something worth noting. But yeah, look, I've got a bunch of points I'd really love to have a chat, and I'm sure other people would too.
Yeah. So the question of the appropriateness of the benchmark was at the drop-in session, and that comment was made to me. So that comes then back to the point of let's have a discussion with the community about it. What you get and what you don't get at various kind of at budget caps, at budget constraints. This pretends it's trying to do that, but actually it really doesn't. And therefore I find it's actually a very confusing document, by the way, and it's very hard to follow. So therefore, even for somebody who, for whom this sort of stuff is bread and butter, there's a better way to have that conversation with the community rather than just dismiss it in 3 paragraphs.
Look, I agree. There's a whole lot we could talk about at length in there. Michael's been kind enough to put his phone number in his submission if anybody wants to call him and have a chat. Councillor Coe, and then we'll wrap it up.
All right, just a quick question. Look, I'm really interested in the concept of having a list of outcomes and then, 5%, 6%, 7%, here's what you get for your money. The issue that I grapple with is how we measure the true cost of all this whole suite of things that we provide. That's a whole different way of accounting. And I just wondered if you have any suggestions of how we can, without installing a hugely expensive accounting system or project management system, how we can come up with that information so that we can have a kind of a menu approach, because that would solve a lot of problems.
Yeah. So measurement of outcomes is really difficult. I think what you can do though, in that type of thing, and I've done in budgeting for government agencies, is try to kind of say, what do you think you get? What do your constituents tell you? What do you see as the value? What information do you have about the value proposition of your major expenditure items? And make your case.
So it might have to be a best guess kind of thing.
And in a lot of instances, information is really imperfect. It's hard to obtain. It's costly to obtain. But when you're making those decisions, or when your officials are recommending them to you, they must have an idea about what you think you're going to get for your money. And at some point, I'm hoping that somebody will come back and say, did we get what we thought we were going to get? Or did the outcomes differ from what we thought we were going to get? So in central government, it doesn't happen as often as you think it should. In local government, I can't comment, but there should always be a process of kind of, we made this funding commitment 5, 10 years ago. We thought we were going to get this. What have we actually got? And that's the only way you can kind of really try to articulate those judgments.
It's quite complex. I've been involved in an installation of a system that tried to measure things on a project basis, and it's just a nightmare.
But without it, how can you make good decisions?
Tricky. Yeah.
That's a great point to finish on. Thank you so much, Michael. Your submissions obviously piqued a lot of interest, and and we've hung on your every word. So thank you so much for coming in.
All right,
My
cheers.
apologies to the others in the room that we're running late. We're running about 20 minutes late. So we move on now to the Kawa Kahia Community Group. Alan Dixon.
I just want to give Michael a quick reassurance that it is no done deal. I know the timelines are tight, but it's not preordained.
Thank you, Nigel. Well done. Good.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alan Dixon. I'm representing the
afternoon, Alan.
Kawakahia Community Group today. And I realise I'm now going to cut my material slightly shorter as well. So what we've presented is essentially a case study that started in the beginning of December 2021 and ran through till September or so the following year, but which some elements are still in play today. I'm representing 70 plus ratepayers, but if some of the recommendations we make today are followed through on, then it will start to influence positively on many, many more. At its peak, our flooding in Peka Peka was extreme. It started with rainfall in late 2021, was built upon by further ones in February, June, July, and throughout that whole period, the water just did not go away at all. There was no drainage both on the coastal side of Baitaba Road or the inland area, which was where the root of the problem lay. I'd like to say it's a case study that's a positive one, but actually in terms of the response we got from the council, it's not. It was dealt with particularly poorly during the first 2/3 of that period, but I'm glad to say that as time went on and the message got rammed home, your operations team finally took a brave decision to carry out the clearance of the stream in question, which was the Narara stream, and within approximately a week, 200 million litres of water, which had built up on the inland area of the road, cleared away. And from our perspective, that clearance has created a situation that we don't believe will be repeated now because of the nature of the work that was done and the nature of the problem, which was essentially a kilometre-long stream blocked by vegetation that was built up over a number of years where that particular area had not been managed adequately by the operational teams. Now, having said that, there are a number of things that we learned along the way. It's a complex situation. There was issues about the way in which KCDC was able to deal with GW, with the landowner and QE2, and with some unstated comments so far from the iwi, who also have an interest in this as well. So we have a multiple stakeholder situation here which needed to be dealt with, including the troublesome community who was trying to get an answer for ourselves and to remove what was quite a dangerous situation. This was not just an inconvenience, this was actually a safety concern because areas and properties in the Peka Peka area we're talking about here had things like submerged septic tanks, etc., throughout multiple properties. And the effect that this large flooding area on the inland part of the geography had was to basically create a seesaw effect and push through the groundwater on the coastal side, and that's why we had such a widespread impact from something which should have been quite straightforward to deal with. So what I've done is I'm not going to go through all the material I prepared today. I'll happily present and leave the speaking notes to the team here to go through at your leisure. I would point out that what I'm about to talk about is 4 recommendations we made in the other document that was included with our submission. And the reason I'm reading them through now is because I've added into that and tried to put a little bit more focus on a requested action from the LTP team to those recommendations. And that's what I'd like to focus on. And I realise I've lent my glasses, so I'll go and get that just now. This is when you realise that what the youth community were talking about was I am an older person. So firstly, it was to pursue the global consent between KCDC and GW with vigour and iwi backing, despite the seemingly intractable difficulties from legislation and policy. And in terms of requested LTP action, and by that I mean it could be a confirmation or actual action by the LTP team, is to confirm that the year 1 budget will be sufficient to conclude the global consent and that subsequent years' budgets allow for the enhanced maintenance process required in complex areas such as the Peka Peka one. in your plans for maintaining your drainage network, and Sean knows this very well, 95% of those network legs, if you like, are quite straightforward. You've been maintaining them for many, many years. However, there are 2 or 3, and Peka Peka is one of them, where the process now required to get approval to conduct regular maintenance is going to be more difficult to achieve, and therefore more time will need to be put aside to doing that probably on an annual basis. Secondly, move to a proactive approach for dealing with and communicating threats to your ratepayers about impending floods. There's a skein of information out there which could be taken advantage of. Some of it's in collection points like the Waikanae Bore water field, where they've not been used for this before, but other ones have been removed from use because of, again, similar negative interactions between, in this case, GW and the landowner in question. So, confirm that across year 1 and year 2, the budget will be sufficient to complete the new water level modelling system, plus enhanced access and use of real-time water level metrics from existing sources with, wherever possible, input from the community as well, who know where the flooding is occurring. And with annual budgets established after that for operational costs to achieve the benefits arising in subsequent years. Thirdly, and this is a wee bit odd, but get ready to reshape the long-term plan in terms of the periods of time where it gets refreshed. There are certain things, I'm sure, in the plan which, once they're baked in, are true for the duration of the plan. However, nature doesn't wait for those sorts of events to occur, and we believe that you may need to review certain elements of the plan on a much more frequent basis to take into account scientific information coming back from NIWA and other bodies like them, plus what you're observing in the environment yourself with the sort of tools we've been talking about and the ones which you've been developing so far.
Could start
Finally-
winding it up. It's just said
Yep.
finally, that's
Yep.
great.
Finally, accept that groundwater is a missing crucial element from the terms of reference for the coastal hazards report being prepared by CAP, and ensure that the known groundwater issues are added to their findings when published. And all we'd ask for that is that when the time comes to review the CAP report, just remember this conversation and do your level best to get groundwater included in there. It's a nonsense that a coastal hazards landscape does not include the very issue, which is a clear and present danger now, rather than an unknown element like the amount of seawater rise that's going to occur in the next 10 to 20 years. So for our part, we've made a separate submission in respect of the GDUB long-term plan to try and encourage them to take a much more collegiate approach to dealing with the council. And also we've had on multiple occasions provided input into CAP's Have Your Say page, and again we're quite prepared to attend the CAP sessions when they occur later in the year, and I was at the GDUB offices yesterday to talk to the one we did for them.
Thank you very much. Very comprehensive submission. I thought we might get a question from Councillor Pravanov about this one.
Thank you, through the chair. Thank you, Mr Dixon, for coming along today and presenting this case study. Obviously, with climate change, and I suppose, you know, this is a case study in, an area that is quite small. With the advent of climate change and the importance of maintenance and resilience going forward, do you think that that very unfortunately case studies like this would arise in this district if we don't address some of the matters that you've raised in your submission?
One of the key things is that if you, again, go back to where CAP are positioning themselves at the moment in the seawater inundation, the issue is they're looking at to protect yourselves from that, to avoid that occurring, and that's ultimately going to have some impact on planning, development decisions and so on. But there's a fend option that can apply here as well, and the fend option is to adequately maintain your drainage networks so that when seawater inundation occurs, the groundwater element doesn't become a multiplier. Right now, if you had a look at the plan, the map of the area where our flooding took place, and then you turn to one of the seawater inundation sites and you put in a particular number for that, the flooding is exactly the same. The land is the topology of the land. The water goes where it goes. If that's already filled up with groundwater and seawater inundation happens on top of that, it multiplies the whole effect and it takes it far beyond what we encountered.
Right, so we've gone well over 10 minutes with this one already. Burning questions only. Councillor Wilson?
Burning question. Thanks, Ellen. The once with the clearing of the Narara stream, because that clearly hadn't been done for a long time, right?
Over a decade, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So have you know? Well, there's a lot of rain came down last night. In terms of its ability to flush, do you think that's made a significant difference?
Definitely.
Like in terms of the ponding?
Definitely. The numbers we've taken since the time the clearance took place, and we had a graph which basically showed a peak on peak on peak rise, and then a substantial drop at the time after the clearance was done. Then the rainfalls that happened after that in the succeeding year never went anywhere near where the flooding levels had been before.
Yeah.
And we have rainwater figures going back 10 years, and we've got ground water level statistics gathered since 2021 that correlates very clearly to the rainwater, to the rainfall. Yeah, and we can see quite clearly that's been a major improvement. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
It was a great job done by the team, by the way, but it just took a long time to get there.
Yeah. So who did it? Was it us or GW?
It was a three-phase thing. So basically, the first phase was one contractor doing the Black Drain Channel and the golf course, and then it was Goodman's doing the remainder of the Narara stream. And it was intended to be Goodman's who were doing the clearance work that followed, but because of the sort of intransigence between GW and KCDC, that final phase hasn't been completed yet. So that's a significant issue still.
Oh, right. Okay. We'll chase it. Thanks.
Thanks, Nigel. Councillor Halliday?
Yeah, look, I'll be very quick. Madam Chair, I just want to say thank you, Ellen, for the catch-up we had. It filled in a lot of gaps for me and clarified a lot of things in this space. I note your fend over with the avoid. One thing I do find interesting here I wanted to highlight was point 4 that you've got there. We're in that interesting space, if you like. You say here, get ready to reshape your long-term plan as the impact of climate change on groundwater and sea level is going to bite far earlier than your plan allows for. And we have the other end of the equation where we've got a lot of people in our community who just would completely disagree with that comment as well. So I do appreciate the solid submission that you've put in place with regards to backing up what you're saying with the information.
And just interestingly, during the period of the CAP project, the seawater rise notion of how high it will be from the scientific community has changed 3 times.
Yeah. And
downwards, by the way.
It's certainly a moving target,
Yeah.
and it's getting, potentially a lot closer. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Ian and Jean Gunn.
I'm just one.
Presuming you're Ian.
Correct. Kia ora. Yes, I'm Ian Gunn. I've had an involvement in Kapiti Coast. Moved here in 1959 and moved away, but the family's been here since 1959, and currently I live at the bottom end of Gulf Road. I'm not going to talk about finances. I have to say the previous speaker, a couple of before, knocks anything I'm going to say in the shade, and I urge you all to actually take note of what he said. And there are issues like cost of living, which doesn't really appear in the long-term plan. I'll talk more about the climate change area, which is an area I've been involved in for a long time. And you've said you're going to, I applaud the idea of having a climate change rate, and you're going to do it on the basis of transparency. Now, you've just had a previous speaker talk about flooding and drainage, and I have to confess to you that I worked with Greater Wellington Regional Council for over 30 years, and currently you allocate a flood protection rate across the district on a capital basis, and 80% or higher than that of those funds come from areas outside of the 2 areas that the Greater Wellington Regional Council looks after, the Otaki and the Waikanae River floodplains. So in terms of transparency, that rating is a nonsense. a person with a $500,000 house sitting next to the Waikanae River will pay X. The person in Paikakariki with a $500,000 house will pay exactly the same rate. For what benefit? There is none. And so your challenge in terms of introducing a climate change rate is to actually identify the benefits for the people. So the previous speaker talked about the issues of local flooding and inundation. You need to identify that. Our house is identified as an inundation area, but we sit on the top of a sand dune. Now, yes, we are at threat from a tsunami, but we aren't at threat from the Waikanae River. And it's complicated. But I think if you're going to actually take the public with you, it needs to be a lot more nuanced rather than just a capital rate across the whole of the district. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. A really powerful and succinct. Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
I just want to acknowledge my former colleague at Greater Wellington. Ian was a massively important part of the team there for quite a long time. So, yeah, great to see you again.
And you.
Yeah, and thanks for the input.
Yeah, that's all right.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Much appreciated.
Thanks.
David Kress. Kia ora, David. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. First off, I'd like to thank you for having me here today. I didn't realize it was going to be such a big group I was going to be addressing, so I haven't prepared a presentation or anything, but
We're a bit bolstered in numbers because community board members sit at the table in Kapiti, which is unusual but good. And we also have our risk and assurance independent member here today, so that's why our numbers are a little...
okay, yeah, that's all good.
But
yeah.
we're all a friendly bunch.
Good,
so
good,
just
yeah.
Carry on when you're ready.
Yeah, so I've been a ratepayer for 15 plus years in Kapiti, and as everyone can attest, rates have been going up steadily. And there's obviously good reasons for that, and that's fair enough. But I would like to, the reason I'm here today and what I'd like to really address is how do we have oversight of the roadworks crews and the incredible waste that is apparent, in pretty much all the roadworks that I've been aware of. A particular case I would like to just tell about, just a brief story. My sister's place on Cluny Ave, I was doing some work with her, for her there, and as we all know, the stormwater drains have been replaced in numerous places in Raumati. So we had gotten letters telling us that this was going to happen in February, I think, of 23. And it was weeks and weeks and weeks of waiting for it to finally begin. And one day, I was there doing work, and they began setting up cones. So I thought, oh, finally, this thing is happening. And they got the two guys with the stop signs, stop and go. And then the foreman showed up in his ute. Another guy showed up who was just, I think he was may have been just been an observer of some kind. And then everything started to happen, and a big truck rolled in. A guy in full PPE, like a hazmat suit, showed up behind the truck. So the truck driver, the guy in the hazmat suit, the foreman, the two stop and go guys, and somebody else who was observing. So 6 people, full cones, stop and go signs. And I thought, wow, okay, finally they're going to break ground and get this thing done. The guy with the PPE suit plugged in his water blaster into the big truck, walked up to a manhole cover. Everybody stood back. He blasted the cover, which was clean. There was not a speck of dirt on it as far as I could see. Blasted it for about 30 seconds, unplugged his rig, and everybody scattered. And the amount of manpower and waste that was apparent there was just jaw-dropping. And as a ratepayer, I feel like this is my money that is being spent on this kind of procedure. And I know there's health and safety and there's all this stuff that's got to be done, but this was a bit of a ridiculous case. Okay, long story short, the the drainage pipes are laid in a road that had just been repaved within a couple of months before, on a road that didn't need repaving. So Clooney was in good condition. There was no cracks, there was no potholes, nothing. They resurfaced it, and within months they tore it up again to lay these pipes, and then resurfaced it again on top of that. So when I'm paying rates and seeing the rates going up and up and up, and everyone else is aware of that as well, and we're talking about how 5-6% and how are we going to manage it, what about saving money with the things that we're already doing versus just adding more money on top to feed this hungry machine that is just consuming our resources for virtually, from what I could see, there was nothing useful happened that day. I don't know how much that cost. I could have gone out there with my my garden variety water blaster and done it for him in about 10 minutes. So that's pretty much all I have to say. I think. Yeah.
Nothing gets a point across like a good story. We've got at least one question, Councillor Halliday.
Oh, it's not so much a question, Madam Chair. Thank you for coming in and sharing the story. Certainly take on your point. The process from here is that the council officers, we will have a situation where they report back to us with regards to the submissions, and we'll discuss this stuff with them as such. As far as I'm aware, there's a procurement process involved around this sort of work. In other words, we agree to a price and they deliver the work, so to speak. So how they go about that, that's their business as such, and we try to get the best deal that we can. As such, sometimes we only get one person put a procurement, and sometimes we don't even go forward with it because the prices put forward are just ridiculous, and we step right away from that sort of stuff and we delay the work. But I'm picking that there'll be some follow-up questions around this with regards to that oversight through that process as well. That's if you're wondering what perhaps the next steps would be.
Thanks
for coming in and sharing.
That's helpful.
So what is there like a watchdog? Is there like someone kind of who observes like I mean, if we're paying X amount of money for the job to get the water pipes in, they're obviously figuring in, the 6 people it took to clean a manhole cover, or they're doing it because they're milking it, trying to justify.
Oh, I agree there 100%. And I guess that's the questions we'll be asking council officers as a next step in this stage there as well around that. It's not the first person that's mentioned that to me, but it's not a situation where we've got our council staff going out and charging, if you like, an hourly rate to do that work as such. It's usually gone, that style of work's usually gone through a process where it's gone out for, should we say, tender, if you like. So if they want to put 6 staff on it, that's their cost to bear, but we don't get an additional charge on top of that. As far as I'm not aware of any cost blowouts in any of the procurement that's been done per se, but it's a valid question, and I'll certainly be following it up when we have that conversation, as I'm sure council officers will perhaps talk to us about it as well.
All right. And one more question I would like to ask, and this is on behalf of the larger Tennis Court Road community, is what happened with cutting all the trees down and not telling anybody about it?
No.
There was a whole forest
can you
up there on the
quickly answer
hillside that was
Martin?
basically raised.
If Martin can quickly answer that, then I'll allow it. But usually it's kind of out of scope and kind of out of the blue. So Jocelyn, could you just press your button twice?
Sorry.
Thank you.
At Te Whakaminanga about 2.5 years ago, this was brought up as a topic. There were some dangerous trees above the play centre there. If you like, they brought some arborists in. They actually, and funnily enough, when a storm came through, it wasn't the trees that people were concerned about that actually fell down. They've had an arborist come in, and there's basically those trees are dangerous. There's been actually quite an extensive process around doing all that work. I thought it was just going to be dropping one tree at the time that was done, but it turned out there's a whole heap of work that needed to be done there from a safety purposes, with it being over the play centre and around the playground as well. That was the reasoning for that.
And there was absolutely no communication from council to the community about having this happen.
I think we'll just take that back.
Communication, I think, was
comment.
with the play centre that was there as such.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the process is around consultation when we remove trees that are on council land, but we can have a look at that and come
I know
back to you.
there was quite an outrage in the community about this kind of just happening.
I remember.
There might have been some comms that could have perhaps worked better with that. I was quite surprised when I went past and saw it as well.
Yeah, it's not the only time we've had people upset when trees suddenly. Could I have a bit of quiet in the room, please? got quite a murmur going on. It's not the only time we've had people really upset when some beloved trees or a beloved tree suddenly disappears. It's really upsetting for people. Something we definitely need to improve upon. I've got one more question from Councillor Pravanov before we finish this.
Yeah, thank you through the
submission.
chair. Thank you for coming along today and providing us some insights into, I suppose, both these incidents. I just wanted to ask you if you're aware that our role as councillors is governance, and then the other role of that is that of council staff, and theirs is actually the operational side of it. But I suppose where the two meet is, well, one of the places where they meet is where when we're actually setting the rates, and of course we want to keep the rates as low as possible, but we want to ensure that the money is well spent.
Yep, I hear that and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you so
Okay,
much for
that's it,
coming in
yeah.
today.
Thank
It's been really interesting to meet you and hear your comments. Thank you so much. Kapiti Cycling Action. Lynn, John, Jared.
You ready to go?
Great.
Thank you.
Yeah, ready
Thank
to
you.
go.
You've had a long day. Thank you for staying and listening. Thank you. Yeah, Lynn Sleeth. I'm the Secretary of Kapiti Cycling Action. We're an advocacy group for more people biking safely everywhere. And I've got on my right John Baldwin, and on my left Gerard Svatis. And we're going to try and do a threesome if we can fit it into 10 minutes. This morning you will have heard from Mr. Bruce Henderson, Chair of the Council's Cycleways, Walkways and Bridleways Advisory Group, the CWB. We were asked to supply our requests for the long-term plan to the CWB. We did this back in January, so our formal submission is quite old because that was the process that we were asked to follow. So what we want to do today is a little refresh. This time of the afternoon is always a good time to have a refresh. So we just want to refresh our thoughts, particularly in light of recent announcements from our central government. And we've made these remarks in the covering letter which went with the submission, which we sent in last week. So there's a three-page covering letter which is really more up to date. The new Minister of Transport has called investment in walking and cycling facilities a waste of money. And he's asked local authorities to put their plans for lower speeds on their roads on hold. We're pleased to see that this council is proceeding with stage 1 of its speed management plan, with lower speeds, new crossings that will make cycling to schools safer. And the council's $5 million expenditure on the Stride and Ride network of new shared pathways more than 5 years ago, together with the new expressway pathway, you know the analogy, the ribs and the spine, has provided real health benefits to local cyclists and income to cafe outlets. And I can see at least one councillor in this room who regularly visits a cafe on his bike. But the job's not done yet. The cycling network that was extended 5 years ago isn't complete or fit for purpose. Council's own sustainable transport strategy, I think it was about 2001, highlighted gaps in the routes to our schools and our commuter routes. The on-road network of cycle lanes is limited to only 3 roads. There are no facilities for safe cycling on Waikanae's Te Moana Road, Raumati's Matatua Wharemoku, or Riverbank Road in Otaki. Peka Road, I heard that mentioned this morning. I think it was the view of the Waikanae Community Board, it was the worst road in Waikanae, which is part of the council's recommended coastal cycle route. We're supposed to cycle along there safely. It still has a challenging section in the centre where cyclists must share traffic lanes with motor vehicles travelling at 80. Now, I know that the speed management plan stage 2 is going to address that, but we made a point 3 years ago in our long-term plan, let's have something quick to slow the traffic down. Council needs to continue the investment in our cycle network if we are to get more children riding to school, more people out of their cars. We want a cycle network that looks a lot more like Wellington's, with protected cycle lanes on the main routes we use. And there's a photograph in my covering letter of a street, Constable Street in Wellington. Very simple. A lot of the Wellington stuff that's being done now is all frangible, low-cost stuff, but it does give cyclists a little bit of confidence that they're not going to get hit by motorists. So that's my 2 bobs worth. Gerald's going to talk about road maintenance. Do I need the mic? Change places.
I can move. Yeah, firstly, I'd like to acknowledge that it's great to see KDC supporting the cyclists by gradually increasing the cycling network. However, with more cycleways, I believe that there also comes the responsibility of providing a maintenance schedule for these pathways. Basically, we have 2 types of cycleways I'd like to distinguish as the ones that are completely detached from the road and the ones that are right on the edge of the road. And I believe they're covered by 2 different departments. I think the ones that are completely separate from the roads are covered by Parks and Recreation. I can't remember what they are. The ones that are on the edge of the road, I think it's covered by a different department. But I'd like to see an improved maintenance schedule on keeping the edges of the roads and pathways clear for cyclists, because there's so much stuff that accumulates. And I've had a chat with some council staff some 4 or 5 years ago, and they acknowledged what cars do. They tend to be sweepers and clear their causeways and ends them on the side where the cycle lanes are, or the cycle pathways. And if you wonder why you see cyclists cycling down Kapiti Road right on the white line instead of in the cycle pathway, because there's so much debris in the cycle pathway, we choose to avoid using the cycle pathway, which is counterintuitive to providing the infrastructure there. I also once went into a couple of years ago and Evo Cycles and had a chat with Benjamin, who's been there since day one. He works in the front desk, and I saw a half a dozen bikes sitting there. And I asked what the story with these bikes. And I said, oh, they've got punctures. And what typically happens, people, the first good sunny day after a long spell of bad weather, they get the bikes out, and invariably they get disappointed by cycling because they get punctures, and a lot of people can't repair their own bike tyres, and they end up having to walk back home or whatever, and then take the bike back to the shop, and it puts them off using the push bike. So it's quite from my point of view, quite an essential thing to have clean cycle pathways. And I don't think it's necessarily more expensive to do either. I don't know if council, with the road sweepers, I don't know if they have a GPS set up and they can record how the conditions of the cycle pathway or the roadways and pathways are when they're actually doing the sweeps. And I don't know if there's a record of the condition of the pathways when they get swept, because some areas obviously require a lot more maintenance, say Kapiti Road or Emu Road here, being a lot more traffic on it, they tend to accumulate a lot more debris. But other parts I've seen road sweepers sweeping perfectly clean gutters, and it seems like there needs to be a bit of coordination of getting the maximum efficiency out of the service that's provided. Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks.
Hi, I'm John. Look, have you just a question? Have you got? Because I don't want to read it all out.
We do have your written submission
you do,
in
okay.
front of us.
I'll just pick up from where Lynn left off. I ride a bike because I've been concerned since the 70s about how it was all going to work climate-wise. And I do because now we're talking about CO2 emissions. It's word on everybody's lips, certainly around this table. And so that's what I would like to draw the association, direct association between the adverse effects of CO2 emissions and the beneficial effects of the humble bicycle. And what I'm on about today is really urging you to help people like myself and others who would maybe not so brave as me to get out on the roads and foot it with traffic. And of course, it's differential speed that hurts us and kills us. And it would be, there are some real low-cost solutions out there to help people get onto bicycles, out of their cars, like Lynn was saying, and get around to the shops like I do. And one of them, for instance, would be prohibiting cars from parking on the side of arterial routes. They're extremely hazardous and sometimes lethal. And if you've got my submission, you can see the photograph on page 2 was not intended to show this, but you can imagine riding a bicycle in the direction of the car that's overtaking a parked car and wondering whether he's seen you or not, or even worse still, is there somebody in the car that's parked and they're going to open the door and door you, and you fall off and you're seriously hurt. So I appreciate the removal of the right of motorists to park their vehicles on, and I'm only talking arterial roads, not residential ones, is going to be problematic, and you're going to become very unpopular for doing it. But it's their convenience versus our health and safety. And it's an initiative that I'd put it to you all to seriously consider, because the cost implications are minimal. Paint is very cheap. And I understand also that you've now got the right to just go ahead and do this stuff, whereas a few years ago you had to consult with the public before you did these changes. You can introduce and do these initiatives, and then within a period of 12 months or 2 years, I'm not familiar with the legislation, there's a requirement to consult with the public to see how they're being affected. And it's a much more proactive way of doing it. Anyway, look, I just, the other thing I'd really like to see, and it's a pity Sean's not here, because I've seen him, he rolled this footpath out on Arrawatta Road, which is an arterial road, and just ripping up old, decrepit foot paving and replacing like for like, essentially. And for another metre of concrete, we could have had a shared pathway on here. Kids going to school could have been, the vulnerable and the cautious could be riding in mobility scooters these days. The old footpaths, they were designed and built 30, 40 years ago. We didn't have mobility scooters then.
That's so true.
And we didn't have 40, 50,000 people in Kapiti. Life has changed, and yet we're still rolling out the same infrastructure. And what a pity, the additional cost, ripping up 500 millimetres of the road, brand new curb and channel, 1,500 wide footpath, and brand new concrete driveways for motorists, and not enough money, John. We don't have enough money for the extra width. And I'd really urge you to look very carefully at budget, because I think we're all saying here, you've got the money. I mean, every fortnight, $120 goes out of my account into yours, and I'm pretty sure that everybody else in Kapiti has the same experience. So you've got the money. It's not a priority, and we really, if we're serious about climate change, and I probably don't have enough time to go over your website. It's very interesting and reassuring to see the commitment to CO2 reduction, CO2 emissions. It's quite bolstering to see the words, and it was quite bolstering. What did you say, in 2001?
2001. Yeah.
The sustainable transport strategy.
Would you like to move on to questions? Would you like to move on to some questions? So that if we stop now, we've got time for some questions.
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you to our 3 wise cyclists.
Right.
Councillor Pravanov.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Lynn, John and Gerard for coming along to speak today. My question is actually to John for some of the comments that you've made. So, so last year, KCDC implemented a plan change for intensification of housing, and amongst all that, the requirement for improved parking was absent. And so if parking isn't going to occur in premises, it's
Mm.
potentially going to be on the street. You're obviously much closer to council, the operational side of it, than we are. Are there any plans that you're aware of to address this?
I'm not personally, you, Lynn?
No. But I can talk to you, as I've talked to John many times, about the old National Roads Board demarcation. You know, the footpath is almost 1.5 metres. It's been 1.5 metres since 1960. And then the shared pathway is 2.5. And you have to put up an economic cost-benefit case to go to 2.5. It seems crazy, because for a little bit of extra money, when you've got the contractor on site, it's happening in our street. We've got Higgins in our street for 4 weeks, and all they're doing is putting back the footpath that was there before, because there's a few kinks as a result of the trees. We've lost about 12 mature magnolia trees. We've got 4 weeks of Higgins, and at the end of that, we'll have exactly the same footpaths as we had before.
So the solution would be, Wellington need look no further than what's happened in Wellington. Island Bay, there was a hell of a storm. What happened there? When they pushed the car parking towards the centre of the road and provided a safe lane, a haven for cyclists to go down, and that's really, that's a totally acceptable solution for us, where we are separated from the fast-moving cars. The difficulty has been in the past, like Te Moana Road is a very wide road, but you've got a hugely wide painted flush median along the middle and not enough room for cycle lanes, ostensibly to pander for the profitability of insurance companies. And the wide median is for cars that are turning right to pull over into, so they're not rear-ended.
Right.
But you don't see that sort of attitude in Palmerston North, where active transport mode is a higher priority than the profitability of insurance companies.
If you look at the examples in Wellington, Constable Street's in my letter, but we did a ride around Wellington about a month ago, John and I and a few other people, advocates, and all those hill streets, like the one that goes up Brooklyn Hill, the one that goes up Tiara Valley, the one that goes up Bowen Street to the gardens, they've all got that same treatment on the uphill lane, because the cyclists are going much slower, 10k an hour, and the motorists going at 50, and it's that difference of speed. So they've got that protection of the cycle lane on the uphill, nothing on the downhill, because you can ride faster downhill, and you've also got some subtle little protection. It's just plastic. The maintenance vehicles can get over it, so there's no maintenance issues. It's just a question of identifying those key areas where cycling is difficult or dangerous.
Okay, I've got a couple
and
more.
they have had to ban parking on those uphill lanes, obviously. Constable Street, obviously, people in that Newtown area will all have a car and they'll all be parking on the street. But you've
Okay, got a couple more questions. If you keep the questions and answers brief, please, because we've got to move on to the next submitter. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks for coming in, guys. Gerard, I hope you got your new bike from Belgium by now. The question is, are you involved, or will the Cycle Action Group be involved with the Trail Trust? Are you aware of the...
We're aware of it, because Bruce Henderson's a member of our group, of course.
Yeah.
We're aware of it. But I guess our folk, and in theory, the advocacy group covers all cycling. And I guess there's a trickle down here. If you go to Nelson or Rotorua, where they've done a lot of off-road stuff, there is a benefit to the everyday cyclist. We've got more bike shops for a start. You've got better bike facilities around town, because people are riding to the trail. So I think there is a trickle down benefit. Yeah, sure.
And the other one is, as was mentioned earlier, where there are subdivision. I think Jocelyn raised this point, where there are subdivisions and that less and less are they building parking on site, and so people are going out onto the street. So does Kapiti Cycling Action get actively involved in resource consent hearings in terms of
I believe from Bruce Henderson that the CWB has a look over every, Shelley will know this, every new subdivision that's coming up. I know they've just had a look at the one that the Wellington company is proposing.
Yeah.
That they've had a look over that in terms of active transport, walking and cycling. So I think the answer
is that sits
yes.
with CWB.
Yeah.
It's a
And
yes,
yes,
yeah.
it does happen.
Okay,
That's
great.
really good to hear.
Fantastic job. Yeah.
Thanks, Nigel. Councillor Halliday?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, I'll be brief. It was good to hear that you're aware of the trust, potential trust. Do you think there's leeway? I mean, you talked about it being off-road, but there's a whole heap of rich stuff here with regards to connection needed through the area and that sort of scenario. I would have thought that it would be quite handy to have that trust for both those purposes. You know, it seems to me like it would be quite good to have that ability to potentially find funding or look at other ways that we can create a joined together map. And that seemed to me like a very good vehicle to do that as such. Would you agree with that? Or?
Well, yeah, you know, I think I'm right in saying that the concrete pathway, Paraparaumu Beach Marine Parade, was built. It might have been Lions, or it wasn't council. It was built by
Lions, yeah.
with private funding. So I think there's a lot of examples around the country where I think Sarah Ulmer, the trust was created to carry on the Waikato River cycleway right through to Norawahia, which I've ridden on. Brilliant cycleway. But it was quite challenging. But she raised money for that. Yeah, I mean that could certainly could happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. Thank you.
Rotary, was it? Okay, Rotary Pathways Trust. Yeah, that's right. Well, yeah, it's all good. Yeah. Keeps the rates down, doesn't it?
Thank you so much for your time today and for the time you put into the submission and the time you put in general. So, yeah, thanks so much. Have a good day. Thank you. John Andrews? Thanks for your patience. Apologies for running so late. Sorry, we're just...
Sorry. Did you hear? Okay.
Okay.
My name is John Andrews. I've lived on the Kapiti Coast for 20 years. I'm retired, and I'll keep it really brief and quick. I really get from hearing and listening and reading the submissions how you guys really do. You really are trying to do the very best, and I thank you for that. And it's a really difficult job you got because you've got so many calls on your budgets, expenses, activities, the social activities. The whole society has changed so much in the last 30, 40 years. Your council's jobs have become, 100-fold more complicated. Anyway, I fully support Michael Papesh's financial analysis. It was very good. Said it way better than I could say it. We all want to succeed on the coast on a successful basis, but not on conjecture of fear or what ifs. All right. I mean, I get from reading a lot of the documentation. There's a lot of scenarios about what might happen in the future in 150 years' time, with questionable support and evidence. All of New Zealand's been asked to reduce its spending, to claw back extravagance and to be more equitable, fair and reasonable. I think given this current climate, we all need to take our share, part of that. Personally, I don't see any basis for allowing the rates increase to go to 24% in my case. The figures were quite misrepresented in the documents. The shortfall can be met out of funds you already have. It was it should have been allocated as a capital cost to the water services project that government advanced you guys. Now that's to treat it as some other expense to be spent on something else. I'm still awaiting the detail on that, but it's not a shortfall. It should have been set aside. And I go back to Michael Papesh's statement about depreciation. That charge to the accounts, if you put that money inside a ring-fenced fund to replace that life, the asset over its useful life, you wouldn't have a funding problem. That's the basic thing I said back in 2015 to Ross Church and Guru Nathan. It's the same story. I'm sorry, but I have to repeat it. It's awful, to be honest. The other major thing I want to talk about is we can't act in areas where we're not authorised to act in terms of the legislation. I see you really do try to do a lot of stuff over the social services, over the social needs of people have been changing. And I hear these, all these speakers. The needs of people are huge, but you can't be everything to everyone. You can't meet everyone's needs. And I think the wider community, and I really get the wider community health and social issues there, the youth before, all the different groups. I really understand that, but it's got to be brought back into a reasonableness of what's affordable. Again, I'll stress that KCD is not in the business of providing social services and non-core activities. I come back to that again and again and again because it's the ratepayers have no choice but to fund that. We're forced by law to fund that by our levies. So really, that's we simply cannot afford the 2.6 billion projected for cap and managed retreat. That someone worked out. I think it was going to be something like $70,000 extra rates over the next 6 years per household. 70,000. I mean, I didn't check those figures, but it's astronomical. The other thing I'll comment about say that was that cap and managed retreat budget was excluded from the LTP plan documents until up to about 2 or 3 days before the close of submissions. Now, that wasn't really fair, all right? So no one could read. I only got that through a news article. And I am waiting on some clarification from Mark de Haast on that, so it's okay. I also noticed, while the Water Supply Bylaw Act 2013, Part 11, that was placed on hold last year. And it needs to be reviewed and rewritten and implemented after a new public submission process. Do you understand that? It's quite critical because you're acting on a legislation that is actually not, it's actually on hold. And I understand why you put it on hold, but we have to move on and get that sorted. And I think you need to define in there the basis for charging water services to self-sufficient rural ratepayers who provide their own water services, which you guys can't do and don't do. I mean, it's a lot of money. You know, I understand the rationale for obviously the urban dwellers, that's totally clear. And we fully support paying for roads and the community services and the swimming pools and libraries, etc. That's all fine. But I think that needs to be rewritten and given a full overhaul because, and also that needs to be ratified and confirmed by the local government minister, the LGFA, the solicitor and the Auditor Generals because that's pretty serious legislation and I think it needs to be written properly. So I'll keep it to that. Thank you for listening, and I think the financial detail in the submission was very detailed. I'm sorry for the extra pages, etc., but there was just so much in there. I can't cover this right now because there's too much detail, but please read it and have a think.
Okay, we love detail.
I hope so. I hope so, please.
Yeah, Mark will tell you.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. I could, yeah. All right.
Thank you, John. An excellent written submission and a nice summary this afternoon. I've got a question from Councillor Watson.
Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, it was a good summary too. So you've got 24%.
Sorry, 24.4. Yes.
Yeah. So whereabouts are you?
We're just in Emerald Glen Road.
In
Emerald Glen Road.
They're in Paraparaumu.
I'm joking. Well, we're in Paikakariki.
Sorry. Oh, right.
You know, Emerald Glen Road. And I noticed a neighbour, one neighbour's got 26% and someone else had similar figures to mine. So it's not just me, not just us.
Yeah,
And the other point about that was we were below the published median benchmark capital value that you'd put in the document, in the LTP. We're below that, and yet our rates are much, much higher. Yeah. So there's some weird stuff going on there.
Yeah, that I'm not sure about, but I can assure you there was no intention to mislead anybody.
Right.
Anyway, I will just make a very quick comment because everybody wants to move on. I acknowledge you want things to be equitable and fair and reasonable. When it comes to the social services, one of the reasons councils are picking that up is because central government have stopped funding it, and we either say to these really important groups, tough luck, go away, or we fund it. It's a transfer of wealth. And just to answer your question about, because I took it as a question, the equitable, fair and reasonable, we just tax the rich. If we started doing that, then you wouldn't get the rate rises you're getting.
I don't think you have to answer that. That's Councillor Wilson's personal position. in his personal capacity as an individual.
Okay, sorry, Nick.
But thank you for sharing that, Councillor Wilson. Thanks for an excellent submission. We really do appreciate the time you've put into it and the expertise you bring. So we're going to move on to the next one after the break now, because then we can add we then don't have to start till 4:20 after that. So we've got Hospitality New Zealand here. Shane Phillips, if you'd come to the table, please. And then we'll take a break after that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thanks for squeezing me in before the break. So my name is Shane Phillips. I'm the Regional Manager for Hospitality New Zealand. We've been around in one way or another for 122 years now, supporting hospitality and accommodation businesses throughout New Zealand. What you've got in your district is, as far as hospitality goes, you're pretty blessed in that you've got 140 odd licensed premises, and there are other areas that are immensely jealous of what you have here and the options that you have, and it's very unique to this community, and it should be treasured and it should be looked after. Now, unfortunately, as everyone knows, hospitality was, the hardest hit industry, with the COVID lockdowns and everything else. A lot of these businesses are still recovering. And are finding it very, very tough. For every success, happy story we hear at the moment, we hear 4 or 5 bad ones. The cost of insurance has gone up huge, the cost of rent, the wage cost has lifted, the cost of products, everything they need, it has gone up. And it's very hard to pass that on to the consumers. People are being, as everyone knows, more careful with their money at the moment. People are going out a little bit less. So a lot of those businesses are hanging in there, trying to do their best at the moment to keep the doors open, to be able to serve the community, especially the smaller sort of things like the local clubs and RSAs and that sort of like, where it's not so much about making a profit, it's about serving the community and having somewhere for elderly people to meet and mingle and keep active. So an increase in fees, no one is really against the idea of the fees having to go up. They understand that everyone needs more money and that coming in, but at the higher end at 60% for a first year is just too high for these businesses, when a lot of them are not even making $1 at the moment and using other means to prop up their businesses. To find that money is just so hard for them, and it's stressful for them. It really is stressful. So it's what we're sort of asking is consider other options. Is there other ways to be more efficient at the moment? Can you find the money from other areas? Can it be smaller increases over a longer period? Like, what can the options be there to help support people in the hospitality industry so they can keep their doors open, so they can keep employing local people and, preserve what you guys have got up here.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Do you live in Kapiti? Where have you come from?
I'm in Porirua.
Yeah, thanks for coming up and speaking to us.
That's right.
And giving us that perspective. It's really important
Yeah,
that we
we're
hear
the jealous neighbours.
So are we. In lots of ways. Councillor Wilson?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Really appreciate your input into this. You may not have been here earlier, but we've had the Alcohol Health Watch, for instance, who are advocating that it should be 100, that we should be reclaiming 100% of the cost, and we don't anywhere near it, to advocating less. And I saw the example that you gave if a pint of beer went from $12 to $19.20. But I'm not sure if you're aware that there hasn't been an increase for 12 years.
Yeah, we understand that.
Yeah.
And it's like I said, we're not arguing the fact that there doesn't need to be an increase. What we're basically asking is you look at how that increase is done, and such a big initial increase in the first year is what can be crippling, for these businesses, especially at the moment. A lot of them are just hanging in there, just wait to, want to get through winter, get through the next 6 months, and then they're sort of feeling a lot more confident moving forward then. So the thought of these things sort of hanging over the top of them, and like I said, especially the smaller businesses, is where they feel very threatened by.
And I would say, as we've said before, that it isn't a done deal.
Yeah.
We have taken feedback, and there was, again, you may have missed it, but it's a local wine shop came in, raised some very, very good points, which will be considered as well.
Excellent, yeah.
Yeah. So it's not all over, but there's a whole bunch of things to be considered.
Yeah. No, that's great.
And
thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate your presence today and giving us that perspective. Thanks so much.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah,
Cheers,
safe
guys.
travels.
Thank you.
That's okay.
We're ready to go. This is for real this time. Please approach the table, Helen. Apologies for the false start before. So apparently it hasn't been quite clear in the information that's been sent out to submitters, but the idea is that you speak for part of the 10 minutes and then part of the 10 minutes is for questions.
That's
so
fine.
We're suggesting 3.5 minutes to speak and
Yep.
then allow some time for questions. So I will, as a reminder to you, I'll do a little ding at 3.5 minutes.
Okay.
But if you keep going, that's fine, but we won't have time for questions.
Okay, that's fine.
Is that all clear?
Yeah, yeah, no
Great,
worries.
thank you. When you're ready.
Okay. Kia ora, I'm Helen, and I'm here to speak about what's going on at the south side of the Waikanae River. The Waikanae River mouth is known to have been cut in 1930, 1938, 47, 55, 60, 71, 76, 84, 89, 95, and on the 10th of December 2001. That's a cut every 6.5 years for 70 years. Roger Shand, in his 2012 report for KCD, says the high number of Paraparaumu residences lying within the erosion hazard area for the natural inlet is a consequence of the 1960s and 70s subdivision, which occurred on the accreted land lying within the inlet's dynamic zone. Should the present management practice of mouth cutting be discontinued and maintenance of existing river control structures cease, then the inlet will inevitably return on occasion to its southernmost historical configuration. That southernmost historical configuration is at Naportiki Street. The cutting has been discontinued for 23 years now. 14 years on from Dr. Shand's report, we have Jacob's report containing nothing about the cuts except to mention that it is done on a rare occasion. And the report, when describing the accretion of dunes from 1948 to 55, or infilling as they call it, claims it was presumably by natural causes. There were 2 mechanical cuts during that time, and they are not mentioned, and they are not natural causes. Why am I explaining this? Because either someone didn't do their homework, or history is being purposefully rewritten to fit the ideological leanings of those who are making decisions. Greater Wellington Regional Council are the peer reviewers of the Jacobs report. They acknowledge river cuts are made at their discretion. They acknowledge they are not recording the trigger point readings needed to make the cut, and that they prefer to let the river take its natural course, which is to Naportiki Street, I assume. Why is that being allowed to happen? It appears no funds have been allocated in KCDC's LTP to remedy the fluvial erosion, which is close to inundating residential land at the south side, while Paikokariki and Raumeti have provision in the LTR for seawalls to be rebuilt. Rock walls protect parts of Marine Parade. The Waikanae River erosion appears to be being ignored. KCDC have a historical responsibility to advocate for the river to be cut regularly, or to put hard engineering structures in to secure the dunes. Council issued consents for the land to be developed and the houses built. Once what's left of the dunes is gone, the houses further back on low-lying areas will be flooded, as well as the beachfront properties. The stormwater pipes already are underwater at high tide. And this is not sea level rise at work. It does not fit within the Takatu parameters. The rest of the Paraparaumu beach is accreting. It's fluvial erosion caused by the river wanting to move south, and it's well documented. I invite you all to walk down to the river's south end and look at the situation. Look at the houses at the end with the metres of dune left in front of them as the river eats away their buffer, and then do something. You've been asked to do something for years. If Greater Wellington Regional Council won't act, you need to. You have a LTP and we are not included. Why is that? Please engage with residents and build our North Beach community a resilient future now, because time is of the essence.
Perfect. Look at that. Thank you so much
Actually, I have
for your presentation today. Councillor Pravano.
Yep. Thank you through the chair. Thank you, Helen, for coming to speak today. Obviously, you've done a lot of work in this space. Have you, in all your research, have you come across the status of the resource consent that it potentially allows for this work to be carried out?
Yep.
And where is that at?
Well, sorry, I might miss.
So obviously, a resource consent is needed to.
I know. Well, actually, no. My first OIA in 2017, Greater Wellington Regional Council said that they had a consent to cut, and it was at their discretion. The second OIA, I got told no, it's at their discretion, but they have to. This is the most recent. Not the most recent one, the second to last one, they said that they have to get a minister's sign-off from... so I'm getting different stories, and the third OIA, which I just got information back, said that they are not monitoring the trigger points. So the trigger points are the point at which it exceeds 500 metres south or 200 north, and they're allowed to cut. They're not monitoring those trigger points. They don't have a record of those trigger points.
And they didn't give a reason why they weren't monitoring them?
They said in the last paragraph, which my question was, will Greater Wellington Regional Council cut the river mouth? They said, we will cut the river mouth when the trigger points are exceeded. And in the first paragraph that they had, the first question that they had answered, they had said that they were not monitoring, they were not keeping records. So, I don't know, brick wall.
Thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yep, having had something to do with the consent process then, when I was on the Regional Council, and Regional Council at the time obtained a global consent which allowed the Regional Council to go into the river at any time. So I'm not convinced by their argument at all, but I'm sure that's something that we'll have a discussion.
Yeah, those responses were under OIA, and I understood that they were to be truthful responses.
I'm not saying what they're saying
so
isn't
I'm
correct,
feeling
but-
really quite frustrated.
Yeah, that I can completely understand. I just wanted to leap ahead to your response to question 16. You may not have been here. This is in relation to the alcohol bylaw. You may not have been here earlier, where there were others who also suggested, as you have done, that a more nuanced approach might be appropriate.
Yeah.
I just wanted to let you know that's been taken on board.
Oh,
and-
brilliant.
And that will be part of the ongoing discussion for sure.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Kirby.
Hi, just a quick question for me also. You're talking primarily about the cutting of the river mouth. In your understanding, there's also the dredging of the actual river itself. Would you see that as being something that needs to be pushed with Greater Wellington Regional Council as well?
Oh, yes, I think the river mouth is, well, it's well documented that it's not in a great state and it's oxygen depleted. So dredging would help that.
Okay, great.
But
Thank you.
my main concern is
The housing
those
in
houses
North Beach,
sitting on the end, and the beach level consistently dropping while it's accreting around the corner. It's not sea level rise, it's the impact of the river mouth.
Absolutely, I walk that piece of beach a lot with my dogs, so I've seen the changes over the last particularly 10, 15 years in that space around the dunes.
Yeah, in the last 3 years it seems to
And
have
it's been,
sped up.
yeah, it has really quickly. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Councillor Warwick.
I'm sure you have, but have you submitted to Greater Wellington as well in their long-term plan?
I didn't think to do that, but I appreciate seeing that council has.
Are they still open for submissions? No. Okay. Thank you so much for your time today and for the thought and you've put into this and your research over the years, and we'll certainly take your comments on board. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Carolyn Thompson. So Sam Buchanan, Paikakariki Housing Trust. Welcome. The last time I saw you give a submission, Sam, you said, I think this this policy is really good. You can keep it as it is, except at the end of every paragraph you have to put except Paikakariki. Do you remember that?
I remember that submission. Yeah, that policy didn't go ahead, which
No.
I was very
It
pleased
got
to see.
stuck in a drawer and where it remains until today.
Good place for it.
Anyway, on to this submission. Welcome.
Yeah, so
When
tēnā
you're
koutou
ready.
katoa, ko Sambikena tōku ongoa, ko Paikakariki te whenua tupu, ko Ngāti Homea te Kāinga Naine. So I'm representing today the Paikakariki Housing Trust, which is a community organisation that was put together in 2016 in order to provide and facilitate housing in Paikakariki, well, affordable housing. So we have at this stage twice managed to get housing into the hands of low-income people, and we manage a number of rental properties, and we do a lot of other work around the provision of housing, including making submissions. So very quickly, on proposal 1, we're concerned about the rates increase, which will be unaffordable for low-income people, particularly renters, who are likely to bear the cost of this increase as an increase in rent. I note, according to a council paper recently, 68% of Kapiti Coast renters can no longer affordably pay the median market rent. According to council figures again, or figures included in the council in a recent paper, in Otaki, 28% of renters are classed as extremely stressed, and Otaki has the lowest median property value, the highest rate of stress on renters, and yet it has the highest proposed rates rise of any urban area. So the rate rise there is 23.9% on a median valued property, which seems to be placing an unfair burden of increase on lower income people, and particularly on renters who are ineligible for any kind of rates rebate or discounts on rates. I would also note the proposed increases appear to be lower for lower priced properties, have a higher rate of increase. So the Trust submits that a more progressive rate rise should be applied and council costs examined to reduce the rates increase to something more in keeping with rises in wages, especially at a low level. Or preferably no increase at all would be great. In proposal 3, which is the guts of our submission on providing more sustainable council housing for older people. In Paikakariki, we've been made aware at numerous hui that older people have few options to remain in the village when they downsize from family homes. We are in favour of council moves to place the housing portfolio, the current housing portfolio, in the hands of a community housing provider, as that gives a better opportunity for growing the housing portfolio and removes the possibility of sale of housing stock by this or a future council. We would like to see increased numbers of dedicated housing units in Paikakariki in particular, and even within that, to serve Ngāti Homea ki Paikakariki, to enable people to return to their traditional whenua. There's very few people from the local hapu remaining in Paikakariki due to the cost of housings primarily. We note so that any moves to move housing into a community housing provider should be, as in the benefit is in danger if income-related rent subsidies are not continued, and the current government has indicated that there is certainly doubt about that beyond 2025, and we would say that the council, before it makes any moves to shift the housing portfolio, should get assurances from central government that the main benefit of that policy of moving to a CHP will continue for the foreseeable future. And we also would note that we think the continuity for current tenants should be a major factor and ensure that any moves to a CHP will continue present levels of service or better and have the support of the current tenants. And we would also look for contingency planning to take the assets back should the CHP in any way fail or be unable to continue its work. We would just note very briefly that all housing policies are going to be dependent on consequences of climate change, and we would look for a climate justice lens for housing policies to be seen through, and all new infrastructure for that matter. And on a very local issue to Paekakariki, we would look for continued support for returning the Budge House to the Farrell whānau and returning that house in a livable, bringing it up to a livable condition and relocating it to land that can, at least in the future, become freehold and be put into the hands of the Farrell whānau. And I think that sums everything I need to say.
Excellent submission. Thank you, Sam. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sam. The in Paekakariki, there's obvious need for older persons housing should they decide to downsize or whatever. Are you aware of how much land is available for that?
Well, there's two sources of possible land. There are, well, actually three really, because one possibility is the conversion of existing houses that might come onto the market into dedicate suitable flats for the elderly. There's at least one property currently in the market which would be potentially very suitable, and more arise occasionally. The second possibility is the current housing units have quite a lot of unused land around them, the 4 units we've got in Paekakariki. So we would look to site more units on that property. And the third one is once the land surplus to the Transmission Gully project becomes available, that offers considerable possibilities for future housing and affordable housing within Paekakariki, but providing we think there needs to be contingency plans with regard to that, because that could come on the market very quickly and require some very fast moves to ensure that that is made possible for affordable housing.
Yeah. I just wonder, assuming that the Paekakariki Community Board would be across that triangle of land?
Well, yeah, they certainly have an interest in that land and are very aware of the possibilities that that land will create, yes.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks.
Councillor Halliday.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Sam. That was a very succinct presentation, very straight to the point. I just had a thought here, and I'm going to be hated by some people for suggesting it, but with regards to the, I just wanted to float it through you to get a thought. With regards to your community housing trust, obviously there's council flats, council older persons housing down in Paekakariki, not much, but as you pointed out, there's a bit of extra space there. Is there an interest from that trust to perhaps potentially take over or to have that unit or parcel transferred into it for, I guess, for developing the kaupapa down in Paekakariki in that older person space? Has there been any consideration for that? And look, I'll be completely open, I only just thought of it then, and I'm not saying this is a policy or anything like that at all. I was just interested in your thoughts.
I would certainly be open to discussions on that. At the moment, our trust is managing several properties, so we're very under-resourced in doing both that work and all the other work we want to do, and certainly we would love to be better resourced to take on more housing, but we'd certainly be open to discussions about taking that on, yes.
Okay, I just thought I'd put it out there. As far as I'm concerned, nothing's off the table, but absolutely no decisions have been made or even talked about at the moment, but I just wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Good thought. Councillor Kirby.
Hi, Sam. Just a question, going back to proposal 1 and your comment, the Trust admits that a more progressive rate rise should be applied. Could you help me with understanding what you would consider a progressive rate rise?
Essentially lower increases on poorer properties and, well, lower rent rises on lower rates properties, lower rate rises on areas that we already know are financially stressed, Otaki being the obvious example here. And I think a consideration of the fact that this rates rise will be passed on to renters who are unable to receive any kinds of rate remissions or rate rebates, and an awareness that those are the people, while there are certainly homeowners who are struggling with financial issues, and especially older people, the current policy on rates, rebates and remissions actually tends to favour persons on a low income with a expensive house, which is actually, I mean, this is probably not a major factor, but it is exactly the wrong kind of market signal to basically encourage people to live alone in an expensive house when you have a housing crisis. And it's certainly of no help to the renters that are the most likely group to suffer the consequences of higher housing costs and have been historically over the last several decades.
Cool, thank you.
I think we need to transcribe that last little bit. So I'm not seeing any more lights, so just checking. Any more questions? Thanks so much for coming in today, Sam, and thanks for the work that the Housing Trust does. It's absolutely outstanding. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you.
Mike Alexander. Just checking, we still haven't got Carolyn Thompson here, no?
Good afternoon, everyone. Kia hi. First of all, I want to give praise to the council for actually having these hard issues of debt costs. It should have been years ago that other councillors should have got into this. We wouldn't be in such a bad situation we are now. That's the way I take it anyhow. So yeah, good on yous. Yeah, my time's been cut short, so I'll just I'll jump from proposal 1 to 2. Bit confused on number 2 because you've got options there, 8%, 7%, 6% over the same time period. So that should be giving different amounts of debt reduction. So I don't know how you'd come to work out that one. So what do you end up with? It's going to be different amounts, so whatever. But I don't think we can pay off the debt to that level. Just people just can't afford it. I can't afford it. And if we just don't take on more debt and keep the other debt, it will reduce over time with inflation anyhow, substantially. Just lower itself. So that's, that's going to happen. And the debt that the figures you've calculated out on the costs, I just can't work out any of that. It's quite amazing. So we just look at the water pipes, right? And this covers all the sewage pipes, this exact sewage as well. You've got there $270.8 million for network renewals over the term of the plan. 270 million and 70 million upgrades. Okay, so the manufacturers of the pipes tell me they guarantee them for 70 years. Okay, so why are we spending 270 million on pipes replacements when it should be, if we take into account that all Paraparam and Waikanae was replaced, new pipes, new system in the late 70s, early 80s, Paikakariki, northern half, all 50s, 60s, the southern half, all the pipes have been replaced mainly. We've just got Otaki, and that's a little bit of mix different. So theoretically, we shouldn't be spending $1 on pipe repairs. Okay, so a bit of no-tacky and a little bit, but that should be covered by the upgrades, the 70 million. Okay, so Wellington's got away with it for 140 years. We can't get away with it here, not even in the long-term plan. It's a huge amount. I just can't understand this at all. You know what's falling apart? It's just huge amounts. Yeah, maybe I'm looking at it too much. My great-grandfather was a plumber in Wellington in 1866, and his son was as well. So I've got a bit of sort of perspective different on that one. So, well, I've got one of the pipes pulled out in Willis Street, right? They pulled it out and gave it to me, and it's perfect condition, cast iron, pulled out from England on a sailing ship. Back then, they all came out in sailing ships. So yeah, it's just amazing. So anyhow, I just don't know about these figures you've got here. I just, yeah, it just doesn't. I hope you can understand what I'm talking about. It's quite amazing. Yeah, never mind. And the other on the expenses side is you've got there that the cost of concrete, huge cost of concrete. Why aren't we using bricks? I mean, the transport hub over here, we could have done half of that in bricks easy. What I'm talking about, clay-fired bricks. It's all concrete. Would look a lot better in bricks, right, and feel better. And all our footpaths, which are going in soggy areas, should be in bricks or wood. Simple as that. Because you put the concrete on the slope over the years, it tips and etc. Then you talk about resilience, right? If you get a big earthquake, concrete will just fold up. Bricks and that will move around, and wood, nothing much at all. You still use it. If you've got concrete, you've got big problems. So resilience on that against earthquakes with concrete everywhere is a big no-no. Plus, concrete, it just gives a big carbon footprint. Huge. Okay, so we should be using bricks. I've been pushing it with the National Party. Hopefully, we'll get it on there. We used to have a brick factory down at Plympton because the clay down there used to be excellent for bricks. They used the kiln, wood to fire the kilns. Hopefully, one of the things I'm pushing national for is to get the oil out of the Niagara sunk in Hauraki Gulf. So we could get 3,000 tonne of oil there off that one. So I want them to do that now before there's a big spill and we end up tens of millions of dollars cleaning up and a big mess in the environment. So that's looking promising. So never mind. Now on the other side, income. Because National are changing the requirements for resource consent, we should be able to put tidal power out at Kapiti quite easily, okay? That's generation from the tide out there. If you go out there on a calm day and hear the tide running, it sounds like a river. It's huge potential out there with no environmental effects. All we've got to do is run a cable, and we've got a Transpower grid exit point at Argo Place. A transformer. So we need the power wire from there down to the beach and out. It's not a major, but that should be something that Electra and Transpower should be looking at. But we need to get free power on the coast out of that totally. Okay, this is not new. I've been involved in changing the southern complete grid for the Transpower in the southern North Island, and that took about 8 years. And that saves, just but looking up on the hill behind us with the structures I got put in, that saves $5 million a year. So we've got to think about that. It's real important that we get into that. And wind and solar are good too, but they're not reliable. Tidal is totally reliable. You know exactly how much power you're going to get every single day because of the position of the moon. It generates the tide. And we could just have reliable power out here. So it's quite feasible. Okay, it's been done in the Hokianga Harbour. Trialled, worked, but they couldn't put the power cables to the Transpower grid exit because they couldn't get the resource consents. That's the situation. Simple as that. So now that gives you some thinking on that one. So yeah, and we should have windmills over Pycock. I mean, at 11 years old, I had 2 windmills powering 2 houses at Pycock, homemade, propellers made out of balsa wood, and generators pulled out of cars on the banks of the Ohau River. and they were working fine. And now it's all impossible. Can't do anything. So, yeah, and then solar's got its option as well, but it's also limited by the climate, you know. But tidal gives us total generate power. And there's not much more in revenue we can get out here. That's all I can think of around here, major revenue for the council. We've got a big problem. Yeah, it's not good at all. So anyhow, continue on, do what you can. I hope you can look at those figures there for the maintenance of all the pipes. It's something I can't compute at all on anything. But we don't want to be in Wellington situation. We're not doing anything after 140 years. Right? Okay, thanks guys. Keep up the good work.
Thanks for the encouragement, the sympathy, and the ideas. I've got a question from Nigel Wilson.
Yeah, just before you dash off, just thank you again, Mike. You have incredible knowledge and understanding of the history of this place. There is the turbine that's Graham. There's a turbine up the hill from Paikokariki, and the plan was to do. Have you been involved in that one at all?
No, but I watched it all the time, and they did put one up there and ran complete test results of the wind over about 5 years and what could be generated. So that was all done and carried out. So that information, but I don't know what happened because I had all the poles free from Transpower available to put the line down to the substation at Paikop. Plus a lot of conductor wire as well, and a lot of other components, all free, all pulled out from the line Mangahau to Takapu Road, which they didn't need, and all fairly new at cost. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, thanks. Great.
Councillor Halliday.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm just conscious of the time, and we're actually not looking too bad. So, Mike, I just wanted to ask a little bit more about your comment around stop transporting wood from Taupo to dry our sewage, use local forestry waste, and that sort of stuff. Do you have some ideas around that?
Yeah, explain that a bit more.
Oh, you talked about stop transporting wood from Taupo.
Oh, yeah.
To dry our sewage, use local forestry waste.
Yeah, we should be using the local slash around here. There's just piles of it. It's just like, well, yeah, but there's bigger, and behind the hills, it's 30 metres high piles, just huge piles over there, sitting there, just rotting away. And all it needs is a chipper to go through, chip it up, and that makes the product that we can put in to dry our sewage. The trouble is, it has to be put into pallets because that's the way the sewage system was set up. It didn't need to be set up for palletised wood going in. Could have just been fed by a conveyor. So that's the problem, the changeover. But we're paying the trucking fee all the way from Norfolk Taupo to have it brought down. We've got the resource here. I don't know what Jenny Rowan said to me before that started, when we were using diesel, we're going to use the slash from the forestry around here. She was the mayor. And I thought, oh, well, that's good. Well, that'll track on. And nothing happened.
Yeah, look, it's interesting. We had a presentation by Mills Albert at the Electric Breakfast on yesterday. Good gosh. It was yesterday. I wonder if there's a conversation to have with them about that sort of thing, to be honest, because they are into forestry. And I do note there was some pallet technology from down south being developed as well. So it might be a conversation to develop with them, but I'll touch base with them first.
Yeah, they'd be in a good position to...
Yeah, I think they would too, especially because they specialise in forestry roading and forestry and stuff as well. And they're a good local progressive company.
Yeah, yeah.
So no, thanks for the idea. I hadn't thought about that, but I'd like to try and follow that up.
It's going to save a lot of money and a lot of very good for the climate too.
Yeah, no, it gets rid of, gives us a solution to slash, and saving money, it's a win. So
yeah, and the climate, running trucks all that way up and down, you don't need to.
Yep, definitely. No, and look, I always enjoy your presentations, Mike.
Yeah.
Look, certainly, agreeing with Nigel with regards to your knowledge base. It's I learn something new every time you speak. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks for listening to me, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Mike.
And
Really
keep up the good
appreciate it.
work.
Yep.
Yeah.
So have we got anybody representing the Te Moana Road residents group yet? I know Gerald's not here.
Sorry, he's moved to Tuesday.
Oh, good to know. Thank you. Yeah, I wonder if Bede can come at 6:20, and then we've got a break until then. Could somebody please contact? No, Dem Services should do it, or whoever's organising the submissions, not us. Yeah.
So that's moving to just after dinner finishes?
Yeah. So at 6:20. Actually, can we turn off the live streaming? We'll take a break now.